Call the meeting to order, please.
Mrs. De Silva,
Here.
Mr. Melody,
Here.
Mrs. Rigby,
Here.
sorry I said that not very well there, but Mrs. Gillis,
Here.
and Mr. Valentine.
Here. Pledge of allegiance for this evening. I'm going to ask Mr. Gazer to lead us.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Approval of the special minutes for the July 6, 2023 meeting. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Mrs. Gillis. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Melody. Questions or comments? Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Gillis,
Yes.
Mr. Melody,
Yes.
Mrs. De Silva,
Yes.
Mrs. Rigby,
Yes.
and Mr. Valentine.
Yes, motion passes 5-0. Approval of the regular meeting minutes. Recommended approval of the July 17th, 2023 regular meeting minutes. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Mrs. Rigby. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. De Silva. Questions or comments? Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Rigby,
Yes.
Mrs. De Silva,
Yes.
Mr. Melody,
Yes.
Mrs. Gillis,
Yes.
and Mr. Valentine.
Yes, motion passes 5-0. Approval of the agenda for this evening's meeting. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Melody. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. De Silva. We'll note that we do have executive session on the tail end of the meeting with no action coming out of executive session. All right, call the roll, please.
Mr. Melody,
Yes.
Mrs. De Silva,
Yes.
Mrs. Rigby,
Yes.
Mrs. Gillis,
Yes.
and Mr. Valentine.
Yes, motion passes 5-0. Presentations for this evening's meeting. Dr. Marshausen.
Mr. Valentine, members of the board, and members of our community, one of the recommendations on the agenda for this evening allows us to paint a clear picture for our community as to the reasons that there is a levy request on the ballot in November 7th, and to give our voters clear options for what happens if they were to vote in favor of the levy or if the levy were to be rejected. It's important for our community, for us to be transparent, for us to be open and honest about what are the things that will happen if a levy is rejected by our voters. So Mr. Kern and I have a couple slides to go through. We're happy to answer the questions from the board at any point during the presentation. Feel free to jump in and stop us. And everything that is in these slides is part of the resolution that will later appear in Mr. Kern's portion of our agenda.
Okay, let me start off with what is the issue. So we have a $145 million bond issue with a 7.9 mil operating levy. What I'd like to say is on both fronts there is, and we'll reiterate this too probably somewhere else in one of the other slides, is 7.9 mils is based off the valuation that we have right now. So if you look at the levy language that was approved on July 17th, and that's you'll see on the ballot, that'll generate approximately $34 million. So I know we're going through reappraisal right now in Franklin and Delaware counties, but that will actually probably will not, with House Bill 920 and how it's collected, an automatic reduction factor applied, will probably be collected closer to 6.8 mils or lower. So just want people to know that from that standpoint, that it's based off the current values as of today for this calendar year 2023 for that matter. So, and then the $145 million bond issue, while on the ballot, I believe it has 1.99 mils. Our intention is the way we structure the debt and so forth in the millage that we have from other previous bond issues as they are paid off will allow us to be a new millage bond issue. But as we're required to, and the county auditor certifies that millage stuff for the ballot issue that we have placed before the voters. You will see that on the actual ballot language when people go to vote. As far as approved goes, I'm looking on the bond side, Dr. Marshausen will talk about the operating side. Elementary 15, which will be right near here, on the old Riviera property there. That'll allow us for our growing enrollment that we have, especially at the elementary level. And Dr. Marshausen will have a slide later that'll show even in our middle school and our high school areas, but this will take the immediate need of the elementaries. We also have, the same way there, is our preschool addition. And I know Mr. Anders has talked about previously, we have to start serving kids with disabilities at the age of 3. But we also run a peer model with that too. So as those kids are identified with the disabilities and we grow from a peer perspective too, we need the additional space to do that. And also then finally, we have capital improvements at 14 schools. It's wide ranging from, for example, at the elementary level, we have new playgrounds or replacement of playgrounds that kind of outdated their time. And then also maybe other things like, for example, roofs or HVAC systems for whole buildings and stuff. So be able to have a lot of different points in the district be affected and benefit from these bond improvements.
Mr. Kern, before we move any further, I just wanted to hit this because I know this came up at the last meeting, well, after whatever date that was, the 9th or whatever. This is based off of current values, not
Yes.
new values.
You are
So if
correct.
we don't pass and we go back to try to pass again, that will be on
Yes.
whatever's new.
Yes, and I was going to talk about it a little bit later, but I can touch on that real quick.
I just love it so much, I didn't want to miss it.
That's true, and we want to continue saying it a couple times. I think just to reiterate things is always good. Yes, for example, if we were to pass, it's based off the current values. Now, if we come back next year, it will be based off the new values at that time. So, and that's a thing too to talk about. Let me get into a little later of what that would mean or what
Okay,
that might
perfect.
look like. But yeah, to answer your question or reiterate what you said, if we pass, it'll be based off current values. If we don't, we come back to voters as we would plan to do, and you'll see in the resolution in 2024, it would be based on the new values.
Thank you, Mr. Kern.
From an operating standpoint, this is not an either-or levy, this is a yes-and levy. So if approved by our voters, we will maintain our current staffing levels and our current offerings, but we will also commit to being more efficient and look at our class sizes and our secondary offerings to be able to maximize our staff with the number of students that we serve. So this is a yes and as Brian will talk about as we go through this presentation, if we don't make any changes, this levy will only last for 3 years. Our commitment is, when approved, for this levy to last 4 years. So we have to continue to seek opportunities to be more efficient, to utilize our staff in a way that maximizes their potential impact with the students that we serve. If approved by our voters, this will maintain academic options for our students. This will maintain athletics and art opportunities as they currently stand with our students. If approved by our voters on November 7th, we will phase in all-day kindergarten in the Dublin City Schools. And with the addition of elementary 15, the only elementary schools that will have their attendance boundaries adjusted are the elementary schools in the Northwest Quadrant, which will largely be Depp, Glacier Ridge, and Deer Run, with some of the current Penny population that is in the Jerome Village area, namely Dogwood at Jerome Village, being part of that reshuffling in order to get students from Depp and Glacier to the new building where it stands now. So those are the things that, if approved, we would like and we would be able to continue to do at the district level. As Brian mentioned, and you've seen this slide, and this is published in multiple places on our website, the list of improvements with the bond far exceeds just the preschool and elementary 15. There are about $7.5 million worth of additions, worth of upgrades at Scioto High School, including HVAC, elevators, and so forth. We have elementary sites that get upgrades. All of our middle school sites get upgrades, and there are a number of upgrades to our athletic facilities. Dublin has fallen behind our peers when it comes to upkeep of our current outdoor facilities, as well as the opportunities in some of the other outdoor facilities that we are now seeing at Worthington, at Olentangy, at Upper Arlington. We have to be able to maintain our facilities to provide an experience that is on par with our neighboring districts.
Why not? So you've seen this slide many, many times. This is probably, if you recall from my 5-year forecast updates that we do in November and May. You've seen this slide. It's usually probably the second slide that you'll see, typically second or third, where we talk about the run rate between revenues and expenditures, and then kind of the ending balance perspective. This is not unlike many suburban districts and districts that are growing. You see that from a expenditure basis there as the red line goes up. Revenue remains relatively flat as we go over time there. And so as you move along, and just as you would too, the ending balance of every year kind of goes dips as you get to that point where the red line crosses the revenue line, the expenses cross the revenue. So at that point is looking to see when to be on the ballot, and the time is now. And so one of the things that we talked about, and we've said this, I believe, at not the last one, but the very first one, where the first vote you guys took. If we didn't do this now, and without making any reductions or anything or whatever, you would seen a lot higher millage, probably almost double than what we're asking. So time is now to do it for that purposes, so we can extend for 3 years at this, and then, like I said, we'll try to get that to 4 years. And historically, 7.9 mils has been kind of that range if you look over time, if you look over probably the last 25, 30 years in the voting for the operating levy.
Mr. Kern, can I just ask, I know you're good with your estimates and projections. If this levy should fail in November and we go back on the ballot next November, could you give a range or an idea of what the millage would be at that point?
I wouldn't. That depends, and I think that's part of what that's kind of going with Mrs. Gillis' question there too. Is we can talk about this now too, Mr. Rigby too. It also depends on what if you guys would want to bring back as a board. We're going to talk about the reject slides and what that means, and if you want to bring back X, Y, Z, that has a cost to it, right? For example, or you bring back nothing. So. It's conjecture at this point to say something. I don't think I want to put something out there that I don't, but that we couldn't say for sure is we'll have to make decisions at that point. So.
Thank you.
We've talked a lot. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this slide. Our enrollment is growing at a rapid rate. We're about 250 to 270 students a year growth when looking at our moderate enrollment projections. And when you look at what's happening in the Central Ohio region and the need for housing, not just in Dublin, which is the destination district for families who have the means and want their students in a high-performing suburban school district, all of the greater Columbus area is growing. We used this map before. If you look at the C on this map just today on NBC4 was a story about 330 units that are being proposed to Dublin Planning and Zoning at Metro Center. And that's the C on this map. And we continue to see the need for growth in the housing market in Central Ohio. The far south dot on this slide is the old athletic club at Sawmill, which the city of Columbus did 100% tax abatement for 15 years on over 200 units. we continue to see the need throughout our district for more housing. So while right now the growth is largely in our northwest quadrant, we have to be prepared and nimble and able to adjust to what could be rapidly changing housing needs and developments all across the district.
So, what if this is rejected? Our plan would be to make at a minimum here, and you see in the resolution, $45 million in reductions. And, you know, how are we gonna do that? You know, if we've been through the 5-year forecast many times, 85% of what we do are salaries and benefits, they're people business from that standpoint. So we would have to do what's commonly called RIF, or it's reduction in force, of approximately 200 positions. And that would begin in the 2024 school year, start of school year, 24-25 school year, from that business perspective.
Mr. Kern, where did the $45 million, where was that number derived from?
It's many things, and I know we're going to talk about a few of them here. One would be, for example, class sizes would be raised from that standpoint.
Are you asking why 45?
Yes.
Oh,
So-
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. my bad.
Brian, I'm going to take you back to here because you can explain why.
Yeah, so, thank you. Sorry, I misheard you there for a second. But from that standpoint, that would give us one more year of positive cash balance. So that red circle dot there on the, I believe it's the green line, would then be above the black bold line there to carry us through to one more year of positive balance from that standpoint. So,
All right, thank you.
This is still you, Mr. Kern.
Yeah, so we have a reduction in workforce from, primarily would probably be from our certified staff, but we also have our admin interns out there and our dean of students. We have admin and support staff that leave, a couple every year at least, and we would not replace those people and just shuffle duties around to be able to support that thing. Now it will, it'll be painful, but it will be able to be manageable from that standpoint. Just some other smaller things from an impact standpoint, but is our facility rental fees increase. I can't remember the exact date, but it's at least 10 years since we've done that. So for our public who likes to rent our facilities, whether it's so we've got a couple of churches, we have other outside groups that like to run our facilities, we would need to look to increase those to better match with the cost of maintaining with those extra groups on there. And eliminate field trips. It's probably more primarily at the elementary level. And then we need to extend life of technology in buses. And it's hard to do that. I know Mrs. Ram has a nice replacement schedule for our technology for our staff, our Chromebooks and everything else for our students. We would try to extend that one more year to get that savings for that. And also on the bus side to extend those life of those buses. I think Mr. Stark can kind of correct me here, but I think typically we try to replace 10% of our fleet annually, about 10 to 12 years typically as they last, depending on how well that bus has been maintained and made it through, so forth. So, and then also increased pay to participate fees. Now we don't have exactly what those would be yet. As we're looking around the area, I do know we have a lower amount, and those haven't been changed, I think, even before the facility rental fees. So they've been manageable for our families, but that's something we would probably try to bring in line to more of the area schools.
One of the main areas that we will focus on in order to achieve that $45 million reduction is class sizes and the staffing associated with that. After the 2018 levy, Dublin has been steadfast that our classes in K1 were 24, 2-3 were 26, 4-5 was 28, and at the middle school and high school, our target was 25. by increasing class sizes to 28, 30, and 32, we're able to accomplish two necessary targeted goals. Number one, with larger class sizes, we're able to serve more students with less staff. These changes in our current elementary schools would reduce staff 3 to 4 staff members at each of the elementary schools. So when you look at 14 elementary schools, you're looking at 60 plus staff FTEs that would be reduced. The other goal that is achieved by making these changes is you increase the enrollment at every elementary school by 100 students or more. And when you increase the elementary enrollment, one of the things that we need to do is find seats for 800 to 1,000 students in the next several years. We placed 12 modular classrooms at Abraham Depp Elementary School in March. Our goal was to use 6 of those classrooms this year and 6 of those classrooms the following year. We're using 11 of those classrooms this year with the growth that we've seen out of the Jerome Village area and at Depp Elementary School, which will mean if a levy passes, that new building will open in August of 2025. We'll be able to Band-Aid for a year, knowing that a new building with another 900 seats is going to come online. But if voters reject this issue, we will need to immediately look at redistricting all elementary schools for the next school year. And when we look at that, we're really taking into consideration we need to move more than 600 students out of Depp at the beginning of the 24-25 school year. Because we would want to take Depp below capacity so that in the event that voters approve a levy in November 24, when that building opens in August 26, we have to have the space at Depp to keep going. So we would move more than half of the students out of Depp, and those students would cascade to the south across the district. So when you look at 100 new kids at every building, really, unless you walk to your elementary school, you could be redistricted. And the only elementary that won't have students redistricted out of its elementary is Daniel Wright. And Daniel Wright will get 100 more friends. And the students who will come to Wright will largely come from Riverside and Thomas. And then you just look at the students kind of cascading down the east side of the district and down the west side of the district. I want people to know, and I've been accused, you're threatening us. This isn't a threat. We have to find seats for 1,000 more students. This is the reality. We have to reduce the budget by $45 million. This is the reality. There aren't options to reducing the budget. There aren't options to redistricting elementary schools. We have to have seats for students. So this is the option that our voters have as a choice when they go to the ballot on November 7th. Our middle schools will need to be adjusted. The adjustment will happen in 24-25 if the voters reject the board's proposal. The middle school can wait to 25-26. If there's a new elementary coming online, we would wait to readjust those middle school attendance zones now. And again, this is simple math. All of those students from Depp and Glacier are going to Eversole, and there's not space at Eversole. So you kind of domino down Highland Croy when the overflow from Eversole goes to Grizel, and then the Grizel students go to Sells and Neckar. Right now we have the most space at Sells Middle School, where we'll shift everything down over there. Davis Middle School pretty much would be untouched during this process because they're pretty much at capacity right now. So as we look at those attendance zones and class sizes, it's two things. It's both cost savings to move towards the budget balancing, and it's attendance boundaries to look towards really a redistribution of our elementary students. As I've said before, and I'll say again, depending on the outcome of this levy vote in November, we'll use Cropper and Associates, who has worked with the Olentangy School District. Their core competency is district boundaries and how you separate your students in your district and how you redistrict. So we will have an external firm that will come in and do the redistricting work for us. We will set parameters for that. We would have informational community meetings, but I do not anticipate community input into where your elementary students would go. It's got to be where there are seats and what's the most effective for our busing, what's the most effective for the transportation. When we come to professional development, right now we have 27 academic coaches who serve as the professional development arm of central office to provide requisite training to our teachers, most of which happens during the school day. We have several PD days for whole staff training, but when we look at things like Core 95 training, when we look at the state mandated dyslexia training that we're in the midst of now, when we look at implementation of math programs, when we look at our technology implementation and our technology coaches, a lot of this is job embedded by coaches at the building level. It also takes place when we're able to pull groups of teachers during the school day, when we get substitutes and our coaches give the teachers the needed training. If the levy is rejected, the coaches will go back to classroom positions, and we would build 10 two-hour delays into our school schedule. We would need those 2-hour delays to provide training to our teachers, and we also would have to stop getting substitutes to come in when we need to train teachers, because the substitutes have a significant cost associated with that. Right now, the coaching model is universally accepted as the best way to get job-embedded training. Like anything else, when you can train people in their space on the job, it's the most effective way to do it. But we would not be able to continue that if we weren't able to continue employing our coaches in this way. And then finally, at our secondary level, right now, we have a number of courses and a philosophy that says we try to meet every student's desire. We try to give every student their first choice when it comes to schedules, and we try to create innovative new ways for us to provide opportunities for high school students. Because of this, we have several courses that operate at 15 students or less. And that allows us to have opportunities for students when schedule conflicts occur. It also allows us to start new programs and to build up those new programs. If the voters reject the board's request on November 7th, we will eliminate any course that has 20 students or less. So as we put the parameters in the scheduling program, if it doesn't have 20 students, that class won't run. It's going to mean students are going to have to make different choices, and it's going to mean we're going to limit opportunities for kids.
Dr. Marshall, what impact did the recent teaching audit have on IB, AP classes in particular?
Well, Mrs. Rigby, we are in the midst of a comprehensive staffing audit. Nate Levinson from New K-12 Solutions started in January with a comprehensive staffing audit. Mr. Levinson and his firm, formerly District Management Group, but Nate's the brains behind the operation. They've met with our counselors, they've met with our schedulers at the high school, they've met with the principals in the middle schools, and not only do they have the data from our scheduling, they have the interview to know how it really works. And they've met with the people who go through that process. We will have a final report on the comprehensive staffing audit by October 15th, in time for us to be able to make decisions moving forward. In conversations that we've had with Mr. Levinson and his team, and we've had a number of Zoom meetings, we've had lots of follow-up. Dr. Schwanke and I have talked to them on a very regular basis. this is one of the recommendations that comes from the staff, that will come from the staffing audit, is we can be more efficient in what we do. We can be more efficient with our world language programs. Our hope would be, with voter approval, over a 3-year period, we can be more efficient so that we don't take away opportunities and we give students the opportunity to plan ahead, as we may take some courses that are now offered every year and offer them every other year. We may look at our IB program and have conversations with our students and our IB staff and say, I'd like to give you 2 years to get the IB numbers up to where we're over 20 students per class. Because I think when given the opportunity, we could increase that enrollment in IB. It's a relatively new program at Central Office at Emerald Campus, where coming back from COVID, I'd love to give those teachers the opportunity to recruit before we axe that program. If the voters reject the levy, IB, some of our smaller AP courses will have to be reduced. So that comprehensive audit will drive those decisions, and it doesn't happen quick. Doesn't happen quickly, excuse me. As we look at this work, it's really detailed, and the complexity of building our schedules is significant. I can share that in my previous work in Hilliard, we used Mr. Levinson when he was with District Management Group. And the DMG reports that we implemented in Hilliard, I believe, are one of the reasons that Hilliard's been able to remain off the ballot since 2016. That Mr. Levinson is kind of the father of academic return on investment, AROI. And the treasurer at the time at Hilliard, Brian Wilson, took me to a conference where he said, you gotta hear this guy, you gotta hear this guy. And his work is so detailed and so specific that, having worked with them in Hilliard and now hearing what the final report will probably reveal here, I think it'll be something that will really serve us well. It'll allow us to be more efficient, effective, and will allow us to stretch levies further between those cycles.
Dr. Marshalson, I don't know if you want to talk about this now, but could you address the question that I asked you earlier about the middle school block scheduling? Is this
Yes.
a good time to talk about that?
Sure. One of the opportunities for reducing FTEs is we are the only district in the area that remained double blocked in 6th and 7th grade English language arts. And we're double blocked universally for all those students. If the levy is rejected, we would look immediately at unblocking 6th and 7th grade English language arts, which, if you think about, if every middle school student didn't have 2 English sections, it reduced costs right off the bat. What I would like to be able to do over time, if the voters approve this, is our middle school principals have already started the conversations about maybe every kid doesn't need 2 blocks, and are there ways that we could better serve some of those students? So the educationally sound way to do this would be to look over the next 2 or 3 years, and maybe a student that doesn't need 2 blocks of English language arts, maybe they need an extra math block. Maybe they're interested in an elective during that time. I would like to be able to unravel that slowly, but if we're not successful at the ballot, we're going to have to kind of unravel that immediately. So there's an opportunity for savings there.
Thank you.
You're welcome. The other area that we do amazing work, but if we're looking at $45 million in cuts, we'll have to look at is our fine and performing arts, our 6th grade string programs, how we staff our middle school bands and orchestras and choirs, where we're able to provide that extra set of hands that can run sectionals, that can teach students to play the instrument, that can pull a group of singers to the side and not have one band with 100 kids in it and an instructor. That's something that would be a luxury if we were having to reduce $45 million from our budget, as would secondary media specialists. As we look at our elementary schools, our media specialists are part of our related arts rotation. At the secondary level, our media specialists are a great resource for those buildings, but in a time of levy rejection, we would have an aide in there who would check out books and who would put books back on the shelf. And I am not at all diminishing the work that those folks do, as I'm not diminishing the work of any of these people do. But if you have to make hard decisions and you look at where you can reduce FTEs with having the least impact on students' daily educational opportunities, that's another area that we would have to look to reduce. We would discontinue our partnership with Head Start. Right now, our partnership with Head Start has 2 classrooms at Riverside Elementary School. Head Start is a county-based program that's funded by the county that is housed in our schools. That Head Start would have to find another location. In some communities, they go to an area church. They go to other places that there's classroom space available. We love having it in the building. It builds a connection. It makes ease of transitions for students. But it would, again, be something if we needed those 2 classrooms at Riverside Elementary. Moving Head Start out would allow us, if those are kindergarten, first grade classrooms, you're talking of 56 more students that we could put at Riverside Elementary School. What we're talking about now isn't an isolated request. Our community isn't going to be done growing when we're done with this. And House Bill 920 will always be part of what we're talking about. So before I get into the buildings and the levy cycles and the conversations that are next, Mr. Kern, if you want to talk a minute about the operating levy cycle and what this could look like if we're not successful and how the tax will be assessed and so forth.
Yeah, so just reiterate a couple of things that we've said this evening already. One is based off of this one, 7.9 mils based off of current values. If we were to fail, we would come back in November of 2024. So that way we have time to, especially from that standpoint of if we say, why not come back at the primary time? Well, with it being a presidential election year, it would be March that we would come back. Have to come back from that standpoint, and then you would have to have all your approvals done by December. And really, what we haven't done is the rejection and some of these reductions that have been introduced, or have been introduced, reiterated again tonight, are going to have time to take effect at this standpoint. So we want to play that out, how that goes, and work that through, and that way we come back in November. Dr. Marshausen mentioned we would promise this would last 3 years. We will look at efficiencies again to come back and hopefully be able to do that in 4 years. Also, too, from that standpoint, is if we were to fail, there again, it would be on the new values after reappraisal in Franklin and Delaware County this year that we're in right now with Union County. So from that standpoint. So we've talked about it before. We've seen, I think one thing we want to talk about too is just from, I'm kind of getting off the subject here a little bit too, is if we were to fail on this time, you'll see a reduction, even though property values will go up, and Dr. Marshausen mentioned 920, you'll see a reduction in your effective mills for your operating levies. And so one of the things we've estimated that approximately comes in about 6.5 mils would be that if where we're at with where we think valuation is going to come out, I think we may be conservative, and if valuation comes in even higher, that reduction would come out. So people would see, even though values wouldn't go up, values would go up, they would see come this January, if we were to fail, they would see a small increase. That would be for the inside mills that are allowed to, that's 4.4 mils for the district, where they're allowed to increase on it. But all the other effective or the voted millage that we have, the effective rate and the reduction factor will be applied from House Bill 920. and would go down. So that's something voters would see and taxpayers in the area. Mr. Ruby, you asked about what would that be, and I talked about, well, we don't have enough information. I think it's up to you as a board and to just make that decision of what we want to bring back. Us as administration recommend what we would want to bring back if maybe there's anything at all with that. So if you didn't want to bring back anything, it would be a lower amount. If we bring back everything, then it's going to be a higher amount from that standpoint. So it's just it's a decision-making process. I know Dr. Marshausen and myself will give you the information that we have at the time to help you guys make the best decision you can going forward.
If the voters approve the levy on November 7th, this is kind of what the future is going to look like based on what we know today. We'll break ground in the spring. We've already started site work on the land on the Riviera property. Mr. Stark and his team have already been working with the city on water retention, moving in above ground water retention to a different location or moving it underground. We will be prepared if this is approved on November 7th to hit the ground running so that we can be ready in August of 25. As those of you who were here for the ribbon cutting saw, we've got great partners in the construction and architectural field. You've already approved several of those partners for the design development and site work for this elementary school. We're ready to go. We're locked and loaded. We just need our voters' approval to be able to get this built and open in August of 25. All of those other projects, we would prepare to bid. We have a process we go through. So be it elevators, turf fields, roofs, parking lots, playgrounds, all of those things, if this is approved in November, they can't all happen in the summer of 24. So looking through that list, over the next several years, we will bid those projects and get those projects going and follow through with our commitment on each of those projects. In 2025, as a district, we're going to have a conversation. And it's what are we going to do with our high schools? We just opened the addition of 60,000 square feet here at Jerome High School. In 3 years, this building will once again be at capacity. Scioto's near capacity, Kaufman's near capacity. And I know there's an impression that there's a lot of space over at Scioto and they can take all these additional students. That's just completely inaccurate. We could shoehorn a couple hundred kids into Scioto. Scioto is not an empty building. We're near capacity in all of our high school buildings. So our commitment will be in the 2025-26 school year to engage a partner like we did with Planning Next, to hold community meetings, focus groups, do surveys, do polling, and work with our community to make a decision. Do we want to build the 4th high school or do we want 3 larger high schools? By building one addition now, and we built the addition here at Jerome, and instead of putting addition on Scioto High School and on Jerome High School, we put one addition here at Jerome. We saved $3.9 million by only mobilizing and running a construction project in one location. That $3.9 million is about 12 classrooms. So by not doing 2 additions, but by doing 1, we bought 12 classrooms. That buys us another year or so to watch where the housing market is, to see where the growth is, and to see what happens. If instead of the moderate enrollment projections, if we start seeing towards the high end of the enrollment projections, the conversation becomes moot, because we're going to need 4 big high schools. Because if the high end of the enrollment projections start to become the reality, if we see growth at Metro and we see growth in the Columbus portion of our district, and then we see Dublin Grand type units going up by Schottenstein Realty up and down Highland Croy or up Industrial Parkway, yeah, we're going to see the higher end of those growths, and we're going to have to build more buildings and keep going with that growth. But so in 2025, community conversation, what do we want things to look like? I would anticipate that being on the ballot sometime in 26 or 27. And again, we don't have a crystal ball. And we're looking 4 or 5 years down the road, 3, 4 years down the road. If you had asked us 4 or 5 years ago, we didn't know what COVID was. So things change quickly. We didn't know Intel was coming. We didn't know Columbus was going to become the Silicon Valley of the Midwest. So we have to continue to adapt and adjust and to be ready to move. But if things continue like they are, we'll probably be looking at a new high school in 27 or 28. And we'll probably be looking at elementary 16 and middle school 6 in 28, 29. If the growth continues to happen, we have to have seats for the kids to go to school. And we don't capture all the values of every new house. And it doesn't keep up with the costs. And 920 keeps our millage right where it is when it's voted, and we don't get additional dollars with inflation. And there are people who tell us, run your school like a business. And here's the difference. If we were a business and we performed like we perform, we would be flush with cash. Because we perform at an elite level. If we were a business, we'd be sending our stockholders dividend checks. But the problem when you're a school district is the better you are, the more kids you get. The higher you perform, the higher your property values, the more people want to build there, and you get more kids. If you talk to Mr. Andrus, our special education population continues to increase. One of the reasons our families with needs who have kids who have special needs move to Dublin. Why? We do it better than anybody else. They want their kids to be here. So for those who say operate like a business, it's a faulty premise. Because the better you do in a business, the more money you get. If you're Procter & Gamble and you're selling Tide, you can increase the price of Tide Pods and you're going to get more money. We can't. We have to come and ask our voters. Purest form of democracy. Every 4 years or so, we get to go into living rooms, have conversations, and let people know the awesome jobs our teachers do each and every day. We get to do that. And then our voters get to make a decision. And whatever the decision our voters make, and that's why we're bringing this list to you today, we want it to be clear. Whatever decision our voters make, Mr. Kern and I and our administrative team will run the district with the resources provided by our taxpayers. And that's what we get to do each and every day. Any questions from the board? I know that everything we talked about is in a resolution that we will ask for your approval in a little bit, but happy to answer any questions at this time.
I don't have any specific questions, just to jump in, but I said this probably 2 meetings ago now, and that is, we obviously covered a lot of material tonight, but there's been a big lead up to this conversation this evening, many discussions and meetings that have taken place, many detailed presentations, and so as we make a decision as a board, I think it's important for the public to know that there's a lot of due diligence that goes into this. It's not something that we take lightly, but I think as Dr. Marshausen pointed out, it's the purest form of democracy. At the end of the day, the voters are going to have a choice with the direction that they want the community to go. And if we've been in this spot multiple times, Scott and I as board members, and we've seen it pass and we've seen it fail, and we've adjusted and we've moved on, similar to what Dr. Marshausen has said. So that's all I wanted to note, is just to ensure for the public that this is something that there's a lot of time that goes into it amongst the board as well as our administrative staff.
So I have one question. I didn't see it in the presentation you just did, and I don't see it in the resolution, but tonight, farther down on the agenda, we are approving a couple of large supplemental contracts and stipends. How do those play in the future if this is rejected?
When we look at that goal, Mr. Melody, of $45 million, we will work with our partners at the Dublin Education Association to decide which one of those supplementals and those stipends which ones are not mission critical, which ones are. And if in partnership with Donna and our friends at DEA, and I can look at Donna sitting right there, we will work with them if foregoing groups of supplementals allow us to retain a couple teachers along the way. Those are decisions that we will bring to you. Right now, we want to lay out to the community 45 million to the target because it gets us one more year. And to get close to that, this is what we're looking at. If the voters reject the levy in November, then it becomes work first with what does the redistricting look like? How do we staff those buildings as the capacity gets higher? Then Mr. Boney works with DEA at the seniority list and the RIF list. And as you start putting names and salaries down as to what it is that will be reduced, then you start getting closer to that 45 million. So of course, supplemental contracts are part of that, stipends are part of that, and those are all part of a bigger pot.
All right, thank you.
Yes.
Any additional comments? All right, there being none, we do have the resolution further down in the agenda that we will touch on when it comes to the voting side of this. Public participation, we do not have anybody signed up for this evening. Board President, Board of Education comments. This is the time first for committee reports. All right. And our student representative, is there an update that you would like to share this evening?
Shrina, thank you. And we welcome our student representative from Scioto today. This is his first time at the table, and it's great as we work through our student reps and have their input. So take it away.
All right. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to kick off this report by talking about this Jerome extension and what it means for us students. This new addition to Jerome allows students to learn in a more suitable learning environment. As we all saw, Jerome is now equipped with top-of-the-line classrooms, updated bathrooms, and even lounging areas. This is going to help remove or reduce classroom disruptions and provide more space for the influx of students we have this year. Secondly, back-to-school preparations are also in full swing. We had staff convocations at the 3 high schools this morning, where staff were welcomed into the new school year with performances by the respective bands, cheerleaders, speeches, and other festivities. Students also received their new schedules for the school year through Infinite Campus. Student orientations were also held across schools throughout the district. And student councils are also back up and running, preparing for the new school year. In correlation, fall sports are in motion with games and scrimmages beginning. And all in all, we're all very excited for the new school year. And this concludes our report. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. All right, so you get to hear me, but I'll be quick. First of all, and Shrita pointed it out, convocation today was great. I'd like to thank Cassie, Keyburn, and Tanya and our communications team for pulling those events together. It's not easy as we go from one location to 3, but we've outgrown being able to all be in one gymnasium together, and it was fun. And thanks to the 3 board members who were able to join us today and the ones who joined us for the 4th convocation, which we had earlier in August, which was for transportation, maintenance, tech staff, office staff who needed to be in buildings today. So we actually held 4 convocations, and it was great to see everyone together. We were able to all be in our shirts today, which were donated, and we're really excited about seeing everybody together and getting ready to go. As I look at my friend Kelly Ram, thank you to Kelly and her team for everything they've done, worked all weekend to get Infinite Campus as close to launch as we can get it. Infinite Campus is our student information system, and we have changed to a new student information system. And anytime you make a migration at this magnitude, you think you plan for everything, and then when everybody comes in, it's whoa. And we haven't planned for everything. Kelly and her team and everyone stepping in, we have a record number of parents. Last I saw, it was 78% of our parents have already filled out the back-to-school information in Infinite Campus. This was below 60% last year at this time. So parents are figuring it out. Our staff today as a couple, they have some agita, and we'll get there and we'll get through it. And we thank everybody for the grace they give us. This is part of our always growing value. We press pause, we look for the best possible outcome, and without hesitation, by the time we get to October, November, we'll say, wow, this is really great. So it takes some time. Also, thank you for our team over at the Enrollment Center. This is a crazy time. When we talk about all those students, they all have to register. And the registration process is arduous. And so people aren't always happy with the answers we provide. And every year we work through the process where someone has moved out of the Dublin City School District, yet they want to find a way for their kid to still go here. Someone is planning on moving to the district, but they haven't rented an apartment or purchased a house yet, but they want to find a way for their kid to go here. Or someone thinks that we should be able to just move within the school district to whatever school we want to go to. With 17,000 students and all of the corresponding parents and grandparents, we are steadfast to our policies. You go to the school in the attendance area that you can attend. If you move, you go to the school in the attendance area that you now live. In March, the board passed attendance resolutions where we had a handful of schools that had some space. And if you wanted to go to one of those schools that had space, you would fill out an intra-district enrollment form and you could do that. And there's a timetable for that. So our Enrollment Center folks don't always see the best of everyone else's response. And I want to thank them for what they do each and every day. And I'd like to thank the 5 of you also for supporting us in being consistent with the work that we do. I know you have people who reach out to you, who know you, who have passion for their child. And every parent's conversation is about their child. But in order for us to serve all of the children, we have to be consistent. So to the 5 of you, thank you for sending those emails our way and those phone calls our way so that we're able to respond to each of those situations. Better together. I talked about this at Convocation. These 3 days that we get to start now are critical to how we launch our school year. Tomorrow our teachers will go through safety planning, and we added a date at the beginning of the school year because we didn't want to wait till November to be able to provide all of that safety training, to work with our partners and our first responders and law enforcement to make sure that any changes we've made going into this school year, that we're up to speed. And thanks to Mr. Collier and our internal coordinators and our partnership with our SROs, it was great to see all of our SROs at our convocations. Those relationships are critical to keeping our students safe. Thanks to all the teachers who attended Lead Dublin, an event that was last week where we had almost 1,000 teachers here at Jerome High School getting training, largely Dublin teachers sharing their expertise with other Dublin teachers. Great day. New teacher orientation thanks to Sam and Mike and our HR team under Brian's leadership for that new teacher orientation, our partnership with DEA, the work that we do to get our new teachers, almost 80 new staff members onboarded and ready to roll and ready to go on Thursday. And then finally to Jeff and our maintenance team. In June, you just start projects. And now all of a sudden it's like, whoa, they have to be finished. And Jeff and Shalina and the team do an amazing job. I got to meet with our maintenance staff and our ground staff on Friday when they had a little bit of a cookout and thank them for all the work that they do. we're ready to roll and stuff keeps happening. And the conversations Jeff and I have about a random roof leak here that's happening during conversations, or a transformer that's blown at Riverside that we're gonna get replaced tomorrow sometime in the afternoon. His work never stops. When he calls, I kind of press pause, because what does he have now? Now, he's had some really good conversations. We got our certificates of occupancy here ahead of schedule, at Old Sawmill ahead of schedule. So when those, he really needs to text me and say, I'm gonna call you with good news, or I'm gonna call you sit down. But Jeff and I have those conversations all the time, and thanks to him and his staff for everything they do. On September 11th, we're going to invite the 6 board candidates to an event before the board meeting with our legal counsel. And we did this the last time we had a lot of board candidates running. Any of these 6 people could end up in the 2 seats sitting here come January. And there's no reason to debate or discuss things that may be illegal or violation of district policies or would be misappropriations of federal funds. There's no reason to get into conversations about things that maybe aren't in the realm of board members when it comes to how the state of Ohio works. So Jessica Philemon from Scott Scriven will help me in a event before that board meeting where we will invite those 6 board members. We will also outline to those 6 board candidates, what the onboarding process looks like. Because having now done this, it's my 19th year, worked with over 30 board members, I think we've gotten better at that onboarding process over time. And for whoever is elected in November, there'll at least be 1 new board member. So to begin that process with education on policies and operations and finances are things that we want to be able to set everyone up for success, and to keep the debates and the discussions during the campaign focused on what we're able to do.
Dr. Marshausen, I would just like to know, I really appreciate that you're doing this and that we're starting with transparency, whoever lands in these seats. Because we do have Ohio Revised Code and policies, so I think as, you know, I'm a voter and watching campaigns play out, I think it's going to be helpful to what candidates are promising other voters they can and cannot do. I also just want to give a kudos to you on onboarding, which is something that does not happen in every district when elected. And while it may feel like you're kind of drinking from a fire hose, it is absolutely necessary and was really needed, I know, when we 3 came on. So thank you for that. And yeah, when did you say that's happening?
It's going to happen on September 11th before
Okay.
the board meeting. You know, one of the things, Mrs. Gillis, is I've been in districts where we've written manuals. When I was in Hilliard, my friend Paul Lambert and I helped write a manual, and it wasn't widely read, and it largely ended up in someone's Google Drive. So to be able to get to where you guys came in and met with all of our directors, and you're able to start those building relationships, which are so critical, it's something that we would hope to be able to do again.
Good, thank you.
It's also important, and Jessica will review, with some of the hottest topics that are engendering the most emotional R's from our community, to talk about where we are with federal law, to talk to where we are with state law, to say that as a board member, you take an oath to uphold state and federal laws. So just to let people know, as they potentially find themselves in that place in January, where you're going to raise your right hand and take an oath, there are things that we all have to do that maybe we don't agree with at the time, but if that's federal law, that's your obligation as a board member. So Jessica will review some of those kind of hot topic social issues and where the federal law stands now, so no one's surprised during the process. And then finally, I am proud to say that our middle schools will be cell phone free in 23 this year. That'll be our campaign. We might put that on t-shirts. As part of the biennial budget in the state of Ohio, the state of Ohio passed the Social Media Parent Notification Act. This will take effect on October 3rd in the state of Ohio. It will require that any child under the age of 16 who uses social media must obtain verifiable parental or legal guardian consent to use those social media apps, and written consent and confirmation will be sent to the parent or legal guardian. The board last year, at the recommendation of the administration, changed our board policy that had previously said middle school students were entitled to be able to use their cell phones during lunch. We've changed it so that they're not entitled to use their cell phones during lunch. And all 5 of our middle schools this year have said that during the school day, cell phones are away. There was a time cell phones were part of the instructional process. Every student in the Dublin City Schools is given a Chromebook that has filters when they're in school, that provides them access to anything that they need. If parents need to get in touch with students, they still have 2 options, very much like we did for years. You can call the office and we'll get a message. There's also email that students have available if parents feel the need to email something during the day. Their students have their Chromebooks and they use their Chromebooks at the middle school quite frequently. In our middle schools where we were cell phone free this year, we saw a significant decrease in issues, both social and behavioral, when we didn't have the cell phones out. There are some who have already asked, can you do this at the high schools? There are some who have already asked at our elementary schools. And by and large, our elementary schools are cell phone free. Those kids don't push as much when the teacher says, hey, don't take that out of my classroom. High school's a different story. That will be a conversation that we have with parents as we move forward. I know we've received, well, just today, I received many thank yous. We've received one parent who said, one email from a parent who said, my child's not going to follow this rule. They will have their cell phone out at all times. Parents don't get to pick individual rules that their children will follow. School rules are school rules. We will work with parents if there is an extenuating circumstance. We will work with parents at an individual basis, like I know one of our principals has, to reassure them in the ways that they can communicate with their child. But school rules are not optional. School rules do not come with parent opt-outs. So these are the rules in the middle schools, and I'm proud that our team has gotten there, and this is where we will be this year in the middle schools. DCSU was held last Wednesday. Thanks to the Riverside PTO for their help. Turnout was a little lower than we had expected. We had hoped for more people. When we look next to September 20th, some of it may have been time of the year. It was still August, people may not be there. We're looking at some schedule changes to the event itself. We're going to discuss this as a cabinet level. I could see that board meeting being a standalone, that between that 6 to 7 spot, it'll just be the board meeting, and then have a couple of sessions after that. What we don't want to do is waste people's time. We want to continue to try to seek ways that we can engage our community, that we can provide what we need to provide. I know one of the things that we looked at, and I look at Mrs. Marple, this year we'll be having a math curriculum review. Her team at one of the DCSUs in beginning of 2024, I'm sure we'll have that community meeting around math curriculum. We'll put it here. So we will continue with the events as scheduled through this school year. We'll tweak it and play with it and continue to look for ways to live that value of always growing as we move forward. Thank you to Mrs. Venny and her team for putting the event together and for putting that schedule together and getting everyone in line, and we'll continue to, again, seek opportunities to engage with our community. Are there any questions from the board?
All right, there being none, we'll move on to reports and action items from the treasurer's office.
Yes, this evening there is quite a few stuff on the agenda from the treasurer's office perspective. The presentation Dr. Marshall and myself presented earlier, here's the resolution that goes along with it. Just I know we said this a couple times, just a reminder, this, by making these reductions, will allow us to operate in the black for one more year from that standpoint. So if the board passes those resolutions. And by the way, this is a standalone, so we'll take two separate votes on some of the other items. Another thing on the agenda is the approval of the Ohio Health Athletic Training Services Agreement and Healthcare Collaboration. This is a 5-year contract with Ohio Health, and we're very pleased with the partnership we have with them and the work that they do, not on the athletic training side, but in athletic performance side. And really, in answering some questions that I have some board members earlier, the language from this contract is probably almost identical, except for a few changes from the last time this was approved. So this is just the extension, really, of the current agreement. As far as transfers go, we have several on this evening. We have one from closeout of class of 23 at Sauget High School, being transferred over to the class of 24. Transfer number 2 is related to our annual safety supply transfer, where general fund helps support our middle school and our high school athletics. The third one is, this is the second year you would have seen this one. Or maybe this might be I think the second year, yes. This is our general fund transfer to our middle school athletic funds. Previously, we used to do magazine sales. As you know, people really don't read magazines anymore, and from that standpoint, and it also too has led to inequities of fundraising between the buildings. This way, everyone's on equal foot here as we go forward through this from an athletic standpoint. Number 4 is, and this one I want to talk about again, and every year we'll talk about this until 2 more years actually. This transfer is related to, we issued back in 2010 and 2011 energy conservation bonds under a program called Qualified School Construction Bonds, or QSCUBs, to do energy conservation work throughout the district to save utility expenses. And the benefit of this, the QSCUBs, was the federal government at the time it was approved reimburses the district 100% of the interest costs on the bonds. The federal government has reduced that down about 4%, so they still pay 96% of that, which is still a good program of the interest on these bonds. The maturity and the principal to pay off these bonds is like a balloon payment, where all is due at the end of the maturity, which is December 1st of 2025. Per the covenants of the bond issuance itself, it makes us set aside each year an annual sinking fund to pay off that maturity when it matures in 2025. This is the same transfer that you've seen many, many years before. And what this does is, of course, this added together will pay off at maturity, but the reason it has to come from the general fund is taking the energy savings that were created with this and used to pay back the debt from this standpoint. So that is for that transfer. And finally, we do have donation. We have some to Carr Middle School as part of an Eagle Scout project, and to our Dublin Robotics Club. And then finally, on the agenda, we do have approval of a class of 2027 Jerome High School and the Jerome High School Student Assessment and Experience. And this is really just a revision of a purpose clause from Jerome from their testing account. That is a 021 account, which is outside of our general fund. And it's a self-supporting fund that is from fees that are generated to cover the expenses within the fund. They rewrote it to have more flexibility on the uses on expenses from this fund. So this is outside of our general fund. Some things, I can't remember if I mentioned the last time to the board, but some unrelated news from all we talked about tonight, but we do have some good news as we continue to operate the district as what have the resources that we have and continue to do is be as efficient as possible. I will say I am proud to announce that next year, starting January 1st for our insurance, our premiums will stay flat this year. There will be no increases. And as you see, 6-8% maybe around the area or even double digits will remain at 0%. So you ask maybe why is that? It's various reasons. One of the reasons is we have new negotiated agreements with both our DSA and our DEA, and there are some changes within that that allowed us to help with that in the funding of our self-insurance fund. We run a award-winning state and national corporate wellness program here. Make sure our staff stays healthy, goes to their preventive visits, stays out of the big claims, and many other things that we do. We look to do. One of the things we did was an RFP on our pharmacy and our pharmacy benefit manager. And so as part of doing that process, allowed us to have reductions so we don't have any increases over the next 3 years of this pharmacy RFP. So, and the nice thing is, as part of this process, it was the same PBM from that standpoint, so our employees don't have to change and do someone new, but it allowed us to have savings that are passed on to not only the district and our employees when it comes to health insurance. So I'd like to thank our unions, our Amanda and our wellness program, and we work with Gallagher on that side to run an RFP process to help us from a broker standpoint. So many thanks to that, but that's a savings to the district from that standpoint. So we had 8% planned in the budget from that 5-year forecast, and so that's about $2.4 million. It's about $300,000 per person. So that's a nice savings for us. And then along the lines of thanking everybody, I'd like to thank my staff as we start the new school year. I know they're working on their big, especially our payroll people and our benefits people, as we have a new negotiated agreements and in implementing them when it comes to pay and benefits. But also we have our new July 1s and Cheryl's and their DSA groups, our custodians and people who work all year. And starting those new pays, we're really working towards our biggest one is September 15th, and that's when our new certified staff contracts come in. But also with, had a chance to work with our new teachers in the orientation process and working with them to get them rolling, get them acclimated to the district. As many of what we do throughout what I try to do from our purposes, we want to make people in the classroom not have to worry about being paid on time, being paid the right amount. Their benefits are in place and helping them out so they can be the best in the classroom, whether it's or driving the bus, wherever it may be. So I'd like to thank my staff for a strong start of the year and of the fiscal year, because we start on July 1 as we go into our big one here in September 15th, and then we roll right into open enrollment season for the insurance and the benefits come October, so for January 1. So we'll continue running business as usual and continue to find ways to be efficient or save costs as we go forward. Any questions?
All right, with there being none, we will start with item 6B. It's recommended by the Treasurer and the Board of Education approve the attached resolution. The resolution is attached within board docs. We obviously discussed it at length. Is there a motion to pass the resolution?
So moved.
Moved by Mrs. Gillis. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Rigby. Any additional questions or comments at this time? There being none, call the roll, please.
Mrs. Gillis?
Yes.
Mrs. Rigby?
Yes.
Mrs. DeSilva?
Yes.
Mr. Melody?
Yes.
And Mr. Valentine?
Yes, motion passes 5-0. It is recommended by the Treasurer of the Board of Education to approve items 6C, 6D, 6E, 6F, 6G, 6H, and 6I. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Mrs. DeSilva, second by Mr. Melody.
Eddie and Sean, thank you for being here this evening. Appreciate your ongoing support and the work that you and your staff do with all of our student athletes. And you guys go above and beyond, and thank you so much for everything.
All right, call the roll, please.
Mrs. De Silva,
Yes.
Mr. Melody,
Yes.
Mrs. Rigby,
Yes.
Mrs. Gillis,
Yes.
and Mr. Valentine.
Yes, motion passes 5-0. Reports from the Department of Academics and Student Learning.
Moderates go first tonight. I have just two quick things I'd like to touch on. The first one is item 8A, and on the agenda, we're asking for your approval for our team and our district physicians. And listen, we are so fortunate to have excellent physicians for across the district. Dr. Whitehead, Dr. Hostel, and Dr. Lafferty for our athletic programs. I learned over the past few years how dedicated they are to the health and safety and well-being of our athletes. And I think it's comforting to know that they're here for our kids, our parents, and for our athletic trainers. Dr. Pietropalo, he's a local physician. We view him as a member of our Dublin City Schools healthcare team, along with our nurses and clinic aides. We call him Dr. P. And whenever we need feedback for forms or procedures, or something important like being able to stock epinephrine in our clinics, we need him for that. So Dr. Pietropalo is a valuable member to our team. And finally, Dr. Shatkin. He has been so helpful with us as we navigate the mental health crisis and work to implement great programs for our students here in Dublin. The second example, when I think about Better Together and I think about partnerships, is One Dublin. So on Saturday, One Dublin held their annual Back to School event. And this is where we pass out backpacks filled with school supplies. Now the good picture of Christy Vinny and Angie Sullivan, that's them. They were in the fun part of this drive-through event where we passed out over 500 backpacks, well over 200 cars went through. And they were doing great things like talking to our families, passing out information about free and reduced lunch. Angie was recruiting for bus drivers or custodians or for any position that we might have available. And they did a great job for that. The not so great picture, that's mine. I took that one because my job at this event is to greet everybody as they drive in and direct traffic. And I put this up here because usually there are 2 lanes. But there was a time where we had to create 4 lanes at the Indian Run parking lot because the need is so great and there are so many people who need this level of support to come and get school supplies, to get information from area vendors, just to know what available resources are out there. So, One Dublin is a great partner. It's not possible to do something like this. There were 70 volunteers, 23 community partners, tons of donations of money and time. And while there are too many organizations and people to thank, Heather Hines, their executive director, did want me to highlight, we had students at Chapman and Penny who helped out. The Kaufman girls softball team helped out a lot, and so did the Jerome football team. So with everybody's help, this was a great year, and so many of our students are going to come to school on Thursday with all the supplies and everything they need to get going.
Thanks, Chris. Talking about back to school, today at Convocation we have a theme of Prepared for Success, and I want to share some highlights of what has been happening in the academics department. Both teaching and learning and student services has been working very hard all summer, but in this final push to make sure that our teachers are prepared so that we can support the students in finding success. So first, I want to highlight a few things we've been doing around teacher professional learning in our department. As recently as the last week, we've had teachers in honing their craft and skill and learning with us. Some examples of that, we have M-Class Dibbles 8, which is our dyslexia screening, training. We trained teacher trainers both in May and June. We also had a lab at Lead Dublin where teachers could begin to orient themselves ahead of the start of the year and practice. We know practicing that assessment over and over again is what will lead to fidelity as we move forward. And we also trained our literacy support teachers in that assessment. Kelly Sabo hosted 95 phonics training for anybody new to grades K through 3. And she also had a huge crew in last week for 4th and 5th grade, spending their last few days of summer honing their skills around their new phonics implementation. We also hosted a Decodables text training where teachers took some of their learning from their dyslexia PD last school year and combined it with our new decodable texts that are in all of our elementaries to think about the art and science of including those within their classrooms. We had new resource training. Gina Seaman, our new humanities coordinator, hosted middle school and high school ELA teachers for implementation training there. And our middle school STEM teachers spent hours and hours doing Project Lead the Way training to update their skills for what they do with our middle schoolers in the STEM space. Additionally, our teaching and learning coaches and coordinators across the academics department offered summer professional learning sessions throughout the summer. And this is a way that we ensure that our staff is always learning, that they are using the most impactful educational technology, and that they are engaged in effective educational approaches. As Dr. Marchhausen mentioned earlier, in partnership with HR, we welcomed new teachers last week, and for the academic team, that meant an opportunity to introduce those teachers to their technology, including Schoology, including all of their resources, all of their new systems, their curriculum, which is a really customized opportunity to sit down. You have all these different new people coming in with different needs, everything from counselors to classroom teachers to ISs. And our teams worked together to make sure that they had an opportunity to meet in job-alike groups with either an academic coach or a coordinator at central office that was able to provide them with specific support in that area. And then finally, summer provides our teams an opportunity to reflect and plan ahead. This often includes a cycle of reflection, visioning, and adjustment. And although I can think of about 50 examples, this has been a long meeting, so I'm going to give you one good example of that and what it's looked like this summer. Under the leadership of Brittany Deschler, Dublin City Schools has rebuilt our early literacy intervention qualifiers for student literacy support that will begin this fall. Mrs. Deschler met over the summer multiple times with our literacy support teachers and with our elementary principals and realigned our practices for identifying students for additional support. Things that have been in place a really long time in Dublin City Schools needed an update. This included first identifying the key early literacy skills in each grade level as aligned with recent best practices in literacy research, and then aligning and streamlining assessments to assess those skills. For us, this meant incorporating DIBELS 8, that new dyslexia screening assessment, into our processes and letting go of some practices that we had in place. We will continue as a team to monitor and adjust as we implement this going into the fall. So with that said, I can confidently say that this work is ongoing and meaningful in Dublin City Schools. We are grateful to this Board of Education for entrusting us with this, and we look forward to welcoming our students back on Thursday, because that's the best day of the year. Thank you.
Just one question, Mrs. Marble. You mentioned the Project Lead program, STEM program, and I know that's on as well. Can you speak a little bit to that?
Yeah, absolutely. Project Lead the Way has been in place at our middle school STEM for a long time. At middle school, that year-long STEM course. Our robotics equipment needed an upgrade, and with upgrades comes some training, as well as implementing a medical detectives unit within there. We're starting to explore some broader STEM options at middle school, and so our teachers learned about that this summer, and we'll be using that with students as we continue to think about middle school. Welcome.
Any additional questions or comments? All right, we'll move on to item 8A. It is recommended by the superintendent that the Board of Education approve the district physicians for the 2023-2024 school year. Is there a motion? So moved. Moved by Mr. Melody. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Rigby. Any additional questions or comments? Call the roll, please.
Mr. Melody?
Yes.
Mrs. Rigby?
Yes.
Mrs. DeSilva?
Yes.
Mrs. Gillis?
Yes.
And Mr. Valentine.
Yes, motion passes 5-0. Mr. Stark.
I only have one item for the board tonight, and that is our annual request that the board sign off on a resolution for Meta Solutions, and that is to allow us to enter their bids for buses. There is there's no commitment on this resolution, doesn't obligate the board, but what it does do is it allows us to be part of a large public bid. It's a cooperative, so we've been with lots of other districts. It gives us different manufacturers to choose from. It just gives more selection than us doing it on our own. That's all I have for tonight.
It's recommended by the superintendent, the Board of Education approve a resolution to receive cooperative bids with Meta Solutions for the purchase of school buses as needed. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Mrs. Gillis. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. DeSilva. Questions or comments? Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Gillis?
Yes.
Mrs. DeSilva?
Yes.
Mr. Melody?
Yes.
Mrs. Rigby?
Yes.
And Mr. Valentine.
Yes, motion passes 5-0. HR.
Good evening, members of the board. I'll start with the certified agenda tonight. You'll see the first part contains the rest of our 23-24 certified staff hires. Dr. Marchhausen mentioned that last week was our new teacher orientation, so a bit of good news. We are 100% staffed. It feels great. Mrs. O'Connor and myself had the opportunity to welcome those new members to Dublin City Schools last week. Just a fun fact, 10 of them are Dublin City School graduates who have made their way back, so that's great. The substitutes that are on the agenda work in our student support services area or have a specialty area and are paid at a different rate than our ESC substitutes. That's why they're on the agenda tonight. You'll see a few requests that are beginning of school year requests, so teaching 6 periods at the secondary level, Saturday school monitor pay, and extended time employment. The 6 period pay, there's a lot of those. Those cover each of our secondary buildings. There are different amounts based on whether someone's going to do a half year or a full year of teaching 6 periods. Supplemental and pupil activity contracts that are on tonight cover athletics and academics for the coming school year. This time of year typically sees the largest number of these as we are gearing up to start the school year, so we're covering a lot of different areas that we may not during other times of the year. Moving on to the classified section, you'll see 15 resignations, and then we're also welcoming 20 new employees to our district, so we've been pretty busy on the classified end getting staff ready for the new school year. And in that same section, there are several salary changes, and there's one name that's in the summer school section that was not included on an earlier agenda, and that's on tonight for your consideration as well. The last section is stipends, and there are 6 on tonight. The first half of those are updating staff members who are getting the 6th grade orientation. So when we originally brought those, we got those approved by the board, and then we brought that back because we needed to update names. You'll see 2 stipends that are on and provide training for our teachers in the areas of STEM. So that's the Project Lead the Way piece that we just talked about in English Language Arts. And then the final stipend is to our newly hired teachers who attended new teacher orientation last week. And that's to pay them for attending those 2 days. That concludes the HR section.
Mr. Bowney, I just have one question on the middle school orientations. I just was wondering about the different stipend request amounts. Is that relative to the number of people on the team for the orientation? And is that decided based on the number of students? Like, you would think it would be maybe consistent across the schools, but so I just wanted some clarification there.
The plan at each school for orientation is slightly different as well, so it's customized based on numbers of necessary staff and their plan for 6th grade orientation.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any additional questions or comments? All right. It is recommended by the superintendent, the Board of Education approve items 12A, 12B, and 12C. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Mrs. DeSilva. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Gillis. Questions, comments? Call the roll, please.
Mrs. De Silva,
Yes.
Mrs. Gillis,
Yes.
Mr. Melody,
Yes.
Mrs. Rigby,
Yes.
and Mr. Valentine.
Yes, motion passes 5-0. Reports from communications.
All right, I'm gonna go as quick as I can because I'm pretty sure I have the longest drive home in the room. So, threw some cute pictures up here from Convocation, just so that you guys could see it if you weren't there. They went off great. We're super excited. We've already gotten tons of positive feedback. People liked that it was short, sweet, to the point, and started off the school year right. So we've been busy with a targeted back-to-school communications approach, which I'm going to talk about here in just a minute. And then the other thing that we've been extremely busy with in my department, or I guess maybe I've been extremely busy with because I'm the one that handles it, is public records requests. So I had shared with Dr. Marshausen, and I believe he shared it with the board, the public records information. One of the board members had asked to see the log. So we're required with public records requests by law to log everyone that we receive, to keep track of what it is that was requested, who requested it, if they provide a name, and then when and how we responded to that request. It's handled through our fiscal audit. So every year I have to turn that log in to the treasurer's office so that they can audit it, and they actually do audit it. They will contact me and they will submit a public records request. It's kind of hysterical. Public records request for the public records request that I then turn around and submitted, and so I have to go back and I have to find all their responses and provide them that to prove that we are doing our diligence with the sunshine laws and public records. So they have increased exponentially in the last month, which is not surprising since we have 6 board candidates running who need information. And then also with the levy, there's people have questions about certain things in the district. So we typically average 5 to 7 a month. I've received well over 15 in the last month. So I've been extremely busy trying to fill those as much as I can. Some people will say occasionally, can I help? Is there ways we can do it? But really when we talk about public records, it's, I guess, best practice for it to go through one person so that it's consistent. We wouldn't want if you had 2 people, person A and person B, public records the same thing, and you had 2 different people responding to them, there's a chance that they might end up with different records, which isn't equitable for the people who are requesting them. And then there's all the tracking that goes with it. So a lot of it goes through me. I do, the directors do a great job when I send out requests saying, I need this information, of getting it back to me. We work together to aggregate it. But in a sense, the gatekeeping is through the public information office so that we can make sure we're consistent, that we're responding to them in a timely manner, following the law and the guidelines for records. So on the next slide, just real quick, to show how our targeted back-to-school communications approach is going, I have a graph here of our Inside DCS family newsletter, and you can see the analytics. The bottom line, the baseline for this is 20,000 viewers for our Inside DCS e-newsletter. That was for the 21-22 school year. That's what we averaged, was about 20,000. So we are on July 31st when we sent out our biggest push for back to school and Infinite Campus. We had over 35,000 viewers. So, and you can see over time, it's just increased as we went on. So people are really getting behind the e-newsletters and starting to realize with consistency, and I've talked before about training people to know where to look for things and creating a pattern of behavior. And so these analytics prove that we're creating that pattern of behavior, that parents are starting to recognize that this is how I receive my information, this is the cadence, this is the frequency, and this is where I need to look. Staff e-news is the same. So in the 21-22 school year, we had about 1,000. We're up to 4,000, an average of just over 4,000 views per issue that we send out for staff e-news, and staff are spending about 10 minutes their day reading it. So that proves that the work, our team likes to see this, my team likes to see this, because it proves that the work that we're doing has value in the district. And so it's important for us to kind of celebrate and recognize as a team that what we're doing is working, which is really good. So, does anybody have any questions?
I just have one question on public records requests. Is there a time frame on your response, turnaround time frame that you're required to adhere to, or?
So the law says a reasonable period of time for the request. So the law doesn't necessarily state. Our goal is unless there's a significant amount of redaction that has to go with that record, which in some cases there does. If it's student records or personnel and employee files, there's a level of redaction that we have to do because they contain a lot of personal and confidential information, is within 2 weeks. That's the goal. Some of them get expansive and they can take a little bit longer. I do believe that every one I've ever filled since I came on board in November has been within 30 days. So we're right around, we average about 11-day turnaround time for our standard requests that we do on a regular basis.
Thank you.
Thank you. Items for board discussion? Or future agenda items?
I don't want to make it longer, but I just wanted to note that Spear Mechanical did donate those t-shirts that we keep seeing in these lovely slides, and I've worn mine multiple times since I received it on August 1st. And
Lots
so
of pub today at the front end of all.
it was really great, so I just wanted to make sure that we said their name.
All right. If there is nothing else, we will move into executive session in accordance with Ohio Revised Code 121.22G, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. The Dublin Board of Education will go into executive session to consider 121.22G, the employment of a public employee. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Mrs. Rigby. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Gillis. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes 5-0. There will be no action coming out of the executive session.
Right around